Welcome back to Lone Star Politics. The U.S. Supreme Court is now weighing a constitutional showdown that will affect millions of undocumented immigrants who want to call this nation home. Texas and 25 other states are challenging President Obama's efforts to halt deportations for some 4 million undocumented immigrants, including children who were brought here illegally and parents of children born here in the states.
Transforms unlawful conduct into lawful conduct. And I think if the executive, the president, has the power to do that, I think that should trouble every American.
The 8 justices showed signs of being sharply divided, but attorneys on each side say they are encouraged. And joining us now is Dallas Appellate Lawyer Chad Ruback. So, welcome.
Thank you, Christy.
Which way do you think the justices will go? Will there be a 4-4 split right down the middle?
That's what it looks like. At Monday's oral argument, they seem to be divided along party lines.
Yeah, what are they talking about? What are the issues?
The issue is whether or not President Obama exceeded his authority. The Supreme Court precedent is clear that a president can order that certain laws not be enforced. In this case, President Obama didn't order that. He ordered that the law didn't exist. He ordered that these people are here legally, that these individuals are here legally, and the foremost conservative justices seem to think that he crossed the line there.
So what happens in a 4-4 split for the folks out there? Yeah, if it's a 4-4 split, what happens to the executive orders?
In a 4-4 split, the lower court's decision is affirmed, and the lower courts in this case, both the trial court in Brownsville and the Federal Court of Appeals in New Orleans, ruled against President Obama. So in a 4-4 split, President Obama would not be allowed to implement his order.
Okay, so how is the argument being received, or is there a question as to whether Texas has any standing at all to bring this
That
case?
seemed to be where the Obama administration hung its hat, saying that, well, Texas and the other 25 states, they really didn't have any standing. They didn't have any right to make the arguments they were making. But that really didn't seem to have much sway with the justices. Even the most liberal justices didn't seem to be interested in that argument.
Yeah, and of course, we have to remind people that we're at this situation with the 4-4 split because of the death of Justice Antonin Scalia, who now, we have the 8-person court split down the middle. So if the Obama administration prevails in this case, is it over? Will we hear nothing else about this?
No, we wouldn't. If the Obama administration prevails, the case would still go back to the federal trial court judge in Brownsville. The 4 million plus individuals who are here illegally, who do not currently have status, would be allowed to stay, would not be allowed to be deported. However, that would only be good as long as President Obama is president. Come January 1st, if we have a President Trump or a President Cruz, you can bet that those individuals would be rounded up and deported on January 1st.
You're already hearing it, right, from Trump and Cruz, the supporting deportations of, I don't know how you do it, right, logistically, but you're right, they have on the campaign trail said this. But what about Roberts, the Chief Justice? He seems to find a way in these big decisions to go in another avenue, another path. You saw it with the Affordable Care Act when he ruled that, when he decided it was a tax actually, or something to that effect. Is there some way he can go here, sort of pull a rabbit out of the hat for the president,
He certainly could, and you're right, he often does. But in this case, he seemed to be right in line with Justice Alito in saying that the president exceeded his authority here. The president has very broad discretion to enforce or not enforce laws, but in terms of decreeing that this law doesn't exist anymore.
Bottom line, Congress has to take this issue up, right? Do something, pass some sort of comprehensive reform, or it's never really going to go away.
Absolutely. The foremost conservative justices did not say that these 4 million individuals should not get relief, but rather indicated that relief needs to come from Congress, not from executive action.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dallas Appellate Attorney Chad Ruback. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Always a good guest, Chad. Always good to see you.
And coming up, could some local state house seats turn from red to blue? We'll take a closer look up next.